This video is the beginning of an ambitious project I've set myself for this year, maybe a little too ambitious if anything, but what's life without a challenge? I made a video earlier in the year about where to live in EVE Online, outlining the differences in each area of space, specifically the security levels, so nullsec, lowsec, highsec, and wormholes, rather than any geographic region, and this ended up being quite a long video in the end, that turned into more of a primer for various activities that happen in those spaces, but it did get me thinking. People probably struggle more with what to do in EVE Online rather than where to do it. That is, however, a much more complicated question. Thankfully, I'm far from the first person to try and answer it, and if you look up what to do in EVE Online, the first result will probably be a Reddit thread, and in the preview of that result you'll see an older version of EVE Online's career chart. In fact, I remember this being one of the first EVE Online resources I browsed before playing, and when you look at it, it's no surprise that it has the capability to get people a bit hooked. The idea of a game with this many options for your career or chosen gameplay is enticing to those of us that probably have something undiagnosed going on upstairs. This was, as I understand, the work of a player called Ultru back in 2016. The resource has since been updated though to a 2023 version by a player called Muad'Dib. My goal in this project is to go through every element of the chart in more detail, to create a slightly deeper analysis of what each activity actually entails. I've already had to have a word with myself a few times about the scope of this project, so obviously my videos will go much deeper than the little blurb on each of these cards, but not nearly as deep as I could go, since some of these topics could easily fill an hour of rambling. My initial plan was to do 5 or 6 videos covering the highest level categories of the chart, so that would be PvE, PvP, corporations and alliances, community and industry, and then possibly market as a separate item, but honestly, just glancing through some of them, I think the community and PvE sections alone are so vast that trying to cover them in such a general sense, as well as diving deep on each of these elements, would make structuring the video in a sensible and easy to consume way very challenging. So instead, and make note of the error I'm probably about to make, I plan on going through each of the subcategories in individual videos. That will bring the total to 20 videos, and probably when I finish this project, a supercut of them all in one video for those insane people that like watching videos the length of an entire workday, something I of course know absolutely nothing about. While that's a lot of individual videos, I think it'll allow them to actually remain approachable and relevant to new bros who probably don't want to watch an entire hour-long video just to try and extract the parts most relevant and interesting to them. I also think it'll work better for me to put them out in smaller portions, since fewer, longer videos would run the risk of me burning out mid-video when something doesn't quite work the way I want it to. Not to mention the chance that it just causes big gaps between my uploads and might prevent me from covering contemporary EVE news and updates. But anyway, enough blabbering. It's my first time doing a video series as opposed to one-off topics, so future entries in this series probably won't include this long explanation of the plan, but nevertheless, it's probably time I start actually talking about what will be the first entry in this playlist, Wormholes. And the first item of that first entry is one in which I'm going to have to immediately refer you to another EVE creator, so great job on planning that one, Bill, but the topic is Nomadism, and it would be a great disservice for me to even approach that without mentioning A Nomad Tale, a 16-part series at time of writing, spanning almost 4 years by Chlorokin. He shows the ins and outs of this lifestyle, the trials and tribulations, the jubilation and triumph, and everything in between. The CliffsNotes version, however, is moving from wormhole to wormhole without settling down, permanently at least. Wormholes possess the unique characteristic of constantly changing their connections. Sure, the actual types of connections can be looked up on a big data table on the internet, this is still EVE Online, but the specifics of which system lies behind them, and who, if anyone, resides in that system, the opportunities and the threats that might lurk there, change frequently. Without any input from you, they will ebb and flow, sometimes just from the natural spawn and despawn mechanics, sometimes because your new neighbour would actually quite like to not share a porch and rolls the hole, or you yourself can mulligan for a new front door and undock to do your own hole rolling. How nomadic you actually are is very much up to you, of course. Some players stick to utility ships like an Orca or a Nesta logged off in deep safes, only warping to them with an alt account to tweak their ship fit or deposit and withdraw resources from their shipborne traveller's chest. Others put up and tear down a control tower to allow for slightly more lazy resource management systems, safe in the knowledge that their ship hulls can be left within the force field with very little risk. There's honestly even an argument, as counterproductive to the concept of nomadism as it may seem, that anchoring a disposable astrohouse and moving along every couple of weeks fits within this definition. If you've never gotten involved in structure anchoring before, the astrohouse is probably a lot cheaper and easier to set up than you're imagining. This can be a great option for anyone that likes the feeling of variety and doesn't want to corner their playstyle to just one system, constellation, or region of space, but be warned, it can be rather high maintenance. Depending on the class of wormholes you move around in, your activities are unlikely to go completely unnoticed, and the downside of carrying everything on your back between systems is how much you risk to lose to a well-prepared ambush. It's a playstyle that requires an appreciation of the journey over the destination and an adventure in and of itself, which will struggle to be compatible with the kind of space hoarding that EVE Online often attracts. Next up, shattered systems. It's good that this follows nomadism because it's actually kind of an enforced nomadism, or at least a forced day trip. You see, shattered systems aren't quite like other wormhole systems, as if there wasn't already enough variation in this area of space. Shattered systems have no moons, more anomaly and signature spawns, always have connections to K-space with the exception of the 5 drifter shattered systems, which are a whole different kettle of fish, and are the only wormholes with ice belts. If you've ever been through Thera, that's an example of a shattered system, although it is the only one with NPC stations. Shattered systems do not allow the anchoring of any structures, so they cannot be claimed and resided in quite the same way as a normal wormhole at least. There's nothing stopping you logging off in there and living the aforementioned nomad lifestyle though. The added adversity and challenge is greatly rewarded in its abundance of content, but if others are willing to take the same risks, the competition can lead to some interesting PvP. Wormholes, with their complete lack of local chat members lists, are ominous places. It's impossible to guarantee you're truly alone, no matter how careful or observant you've been. Sure, there are ways to cut down on the chance of an intruder or to dodge a net closing in on you, but the risk can never be taken down to 0%. You might get set up and ready in this shattered wormhole, curiously dip your toe into an activity, only to find out the hard way that a cloaked Proteus has been a little psychopathically watching your every move for the last 3 hours. That's the magic of wormhole life. While essentially the same actual content, colonizing a wormhole is much more about holding it for the longer term, being ready to defend your assets, and making your ISK in the same system day after day. You do get a little flexibility depending on your preferences and your system's statics. You could choose to either keep connections open to adjacent wormholes to access content different to that of your home system, or you can keep connections rolled and closed off for safer home system activities. Invariably, trying to colonize a wormhole in this way will lead to an encounter or two with other wormhole or even K-space groups looking for eviction content, or even just a good fight. For a small group though, or even a solo activity, you can get away with this for a lot longer than people realize. Whenever I see a group of 4 or 5 players getting started with EVE who are desperate to put a flag in their own sandcastle rather than joining an existing group, I always recommend they go colonize a wormhole. Especially in low-class wormholes, this can give you your own space to collaborate in and feel connected to without the regional politics that comes with trying to do this in K-space. Some would call this a requirement of being a real wormholer, but you should ultimately just focus on doing what you enjoy. Wormhole culture reminds me a lot of low-sec culture, which I have much more experience with, but I think it reflects some of the best gameplay that EVE has to offer. So if you're still quite new to the game, or maybe you've been playing for a long time, but never quite got the hang of wormholes, give it a try. I promise you there is no better way to learn than to try setting up your own colony in one. And it's a relatively cheap investment for all the knowledge that will transfer into almost anything you do in EVE Online. The cornerstone of money making in just about every nook and cranny of EVE Online, wormholes are no exception. I once remarked that wormhole ratting is massively more well documented than the rest of the ratting in the game, and some viewers correctly pointed out that it's because it's predictable. Ratting in a wormhole revolves around entering cosmic anomalies in your probe scanner, of which there's usually only a couple of varieties that can spawn in each given classification of wormholes. Once at the anomaly, you kill the hostile NPCs, or rats, in a series of waves until they're all dead. That part you can say about ratting anywhere, but wormhole rats don't pay bounties like those in known space do. After all, in this great unknown, who would be paying you for the service? Instead, it's the loot from the rat wrecks that pays the bills, pun intended. They come with a few different in-game names, but colloquially everyone refers to them as blue loot because of the colour of their icon in your inventory. These don't need to be reprocessed or contribute to any kind of player market forces in industry. Instead, they're sold directly to NPC buy orders, giving them a very reliable price, leading to a somewhat perennial source of income for wormholers. The wrecks of wormhole rats do give some unique salvage that you can't find elsewhere, and while those do wax and wane on the whims of Tech 3 cruiser manufacturing, it is a nice bit of extra bonus income if you're the sort of person that likes salvaging their sites. Wormhole rats don't have any sort of regional damage type to contend with like known space rats do, and given the low number of unique sites, you don't need much ship variety to complete all the sites in one wormhole. However, the sliding scale of difficulty is massive between C1 wormholes and C6 wormholes. The former has sites that you could honestly run in your scanning ship, while the latter requires marauders or dreadnoughts to achieve the ideal site running speed, or in some cases even to survive the incoming damage. This predictability in site composition and damage type means that there are far fewer complicated fitting adjustments to contend with than in non-wormhole ratting. For example, Ashy in Space has a blog with specific fittings suitable for tackling the sites available in each classification of wormhole, along with a brief description of how to fly the ship, something which goes frustratingly unmentioned in most fits you find online. The fits in question are surprisingly accessible too. Thanks to the ease of fitting into the Myrmidon and the Praxis, you can get started with wormhole ratting sites with relatively few skills. Exploration is one of those terms in EVE Online that means a lot of different things to many different people. When I use it, I'm usually talking about data or relic sites and hacking them. I will be covering that separately in the next video in this series, which will be completely on exploration, but it does deserve a mention here in the wormhole video, even if briefly. Low-class wormholes contain so-called safe data and relic sites, meaning that they can be completed without any risk of dying to NPCs or environmental factors, while both low and high-class wormholes feature unsafe data and relic sites, meaning they contain a combat or environmental damage factor. If that sounds interesting to you, make sure you subscribe so you catch my next video diving deeper into that topic. Mapping out the vast ever-changing network of wormholes was a topic I was really looking forward to covering, because this, for some reason, was what I got incredibly obsessed with during my first 6 months playing EVE. For the uninitiated, and to vastly oversimplify things, wormholes work a little bit like those magical staircases in Harry Potter. They are always connected to other things, but where they connect changes all the time. When you consider that there's well over 2,000 individual wormhole systems, that's a lot of possible combinations. To expand on that a bit, there are limitations on what wormholes can connect to. Every wormhole, for example, has one or more static connects. This guarantees that the wormhole will connect to a certain type of other system, but not which specific one. For example, there might be a C1 wormhole that always connects to HiSec. We can tell that for sure by looking it up in a database, as well as from the name of the wormhole inside it, but we don't know which HiSec system it's going to connect to. That will be randomized every time the hole respawns, which occurs either through exceeding the hole's limit on mass it can transfer between systems, or simply after a certain amount of time. Because of these constantly occurring respawns happening out of sync from each other and with various different limitations and specifications, the state of wormhole space can only be mapped temporarily rather than persistently. Tools like Pathfinder allow this mapping to be done collaboratively and in an easier format for non-experts to visualize. Being on top of this information day after day can be incredibly lucrative financially, or simply a massive help to other players in your corp or alliance. Back when I was getting started, I used to sell HiSec to HiSec wormhole connections to incursion runners, trying to avoid making long journeys in gank magnet ships, sometimes through sketchier choke point routes. But these routes can also be good for finding targets, preventing becoming a target, and giving your group a beeline to asset safety systems or market hubs like Cheetah and Amar. Safe to say, if you get good at mapping these routes and then documenting and communicating them to your corp or alliance, you will be massively appreciated and often very well rewarded. Gas sites in wormholes can be a bit contentious, so I've got to be careful with what I say about them here. They are a source of money. Some think of them as a good source, some think of them as a waste of time. I personally see them as an easy, very low investment option, but I acknowledge that their income is quite pitiful compared to what it used to be. If you're the day tripping kind, it might be worth giving gas a try, but be aware that its value, at least in my opinion, mostly lies in being able to semi-AFK huff the gas on multiple accounts, not exactly super engaging gameplay. If you actually colonize a wormhole and live in it though, the sheer abundance of such gas sites will make them part of the day-to-day routine for most people, as any ISK is better than no ISK when you're waiting for sites to respawn or an annoying frigate hold to close. Just as with ratting in wormholes, I highly recommend looking up the specific gas sites you scan down, as there are different strategies available for each site depending on how you prefer to approach it. Primarily this is because the gas sites will appear safe at first, but after a timer, rats can spawn on the site and disrupt you. A few different strategies have been formulated to deal with this, and while I can't go into detail on them here without being well out of my depth, it basically boils down to avoiding the rats entirely, speed tanking the rats so they can't kill you, sitting outside of the rats' range, or of course just killing the rats. There's actually no mining section under Wormholes in the EVE career chart, so I'll mention it here before we finish up since it's rather similar to gas huffing. It's a straightforward source of income and materials for someone living in a wormhole, but it doesn't really offer anything you can't find in other areas of space, often in considerably safer circumstances. So if mining is what interests you, there'll be a future video all about that which will include wormhole mining, I'm sure. And I do also talk about mining across different areas of space in my Where to Live in EVE Online video if you can't wait until then. Something I want to do throughout this series is to signpost you in each topic to people who really specialise in this stuff. The EVE career chart has a very surface level, basic description of activities. These videos will provide some idea of what that actually entails beyond 1 or 2 sentences, and then the resources in this homework section of the video are going to be very specific tools or guides for exactly how to do some of this stuff. So your homework for this video, if you're interested in wormholes, is as follows. Ashy in Space is an excellent blog detailing the ins and outs of ISK making in different classifications of wormhole space. Grubu's maintained, Nolax updated, Cars modified Ricky's Guide 1.5 is a cheat sheet format Google Doc that lets you see straightforward, at-a-glance information about the sites and resources in wormholes. Katya Say is probably the most renowned explorer in the history of the game, having visited every single known space and wormhole system in the game. Check out more information about their adventure and the services of their corporation Signal Cartel at saganexplorations.net and signalcartel.org. Anoikis is an extremely valuable resource for wormholers, allowing for detailed search filtering of all the wormhole systems in the game, information on different types of wormhole connections, and even some useful at-a-glance information on whether or not a wormhole might already be occupied. Pathfinder and Tripwire are both must-see tools if you're interested in using third-party programs to help map out wormhole connections more efficiently. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to include these in my next must-have tools for EVE video. Chlorocan and Wingspan TT are some great YouTube channels to see more wormhole action, and who can forget the at this point infamous wormhole YouTube story, The Fall of J233255. Then finally, if you want to know a bit more about the ore available in wormholes, use the filters on Celestis' ore table for an up-to-date idea on what is and isn't worth mining, or even just what's available in wormholes. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you coming back as this series continues. This is one of those long-term projects for me where I know that it'll probably suck if you're brand new to EVE and the topic you want more information about is right at the end of this chart, but the hope is that once I'm finished there'll be a playlist of videos encompassing so much of what EVE has to offer. If you want to help support the channel, consider buying your next EVE Online pack, subscription, or Plex from marqueedragon.com using the link in the video description. Use coupon code BILL at checkout for 3% off your order. I've also got YouTube membership enabled now. It's 99 cents, and for that you'll get access to my monthly video where I go through some of the interesting comments for each month, more of an unscripted rant if I'm honest, and I'm sure I'll have more casual unscripted content available for members too, as and when the mood arises. I really appreciate everyone that already signed up, as it's all helped me invest in the software and hardware I need to keep making better videos.